Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the board director at Major Group, where I get a chance to talk to thought leaders, technology experts, people with a passion in STEM to find out a bit more about their career history, talk about topics that are passionate to themselves, and that all important career advice that we share with the STEM Ambassador Association. So I'm really pleased to have Darren Davison with me today. Darren is the VP of Engineering at Cint. And for those who may not have heard of Cint before, they're a global research technology provider, a Swedish-based business, but with a global footprint. And they do some pretty impressive stuff when it comes to research and collection of surveys and using tech to make that possible. So, Darren, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Charlie.
Let's jump straight into it and tell us a bit about your story. I know it's quite an interesting one of how you got into technology and your career to date.
Sure, yeah. So I probably fell into technology in a roundabout route and not through what is probably fairly typical of people these days. I was always passionate about kind of computers and tech as a kid, even quite a young kid, and I'm unfortunately old enough that when I was a kid, computers weren't the norm, and it wasn't everybody that had a computer in the house. So I got one at a fairly young age, and instead of playing games on it, the first thing I did was to unscrew the thing, take it all apart, to my parents' horror when they came in and saw it, because I wanted to figure out how it worked. And I didn't want to play games; I wanted to program it. So I was programming from about age kind of 13, and just always had this interest and this fascination with computers and being able to make these boxes do things that you wanted them to do. But as I got a bit older, I took my A levels, and due to some problems that I had at the time, I didn't do particularly well in the A levels. I chose not to go to my eternal regret. Chose not to take up a place that I was offered on a slightly different course from the one that I wanted at uni, and I kind of fell into working full time at the job that I'd been doing part time, and I did that for a couple of years. Hated every minute of it. Ended up actually making myself quite ill because of how much I hated what I was doing. And I kind of got a break at another company working in an area that was not IT and not tech, but they were doing some technical stuff. So it was sort of a marketing area, but they were doing a lot of product marketing with software that was and analytics around placing products in stores. And so I got into that, and then from there, within the company that I was working in, they kind of recognised that I'd got this passion and sort of talent for programming, and I'd spoken to 2 or 3 people within the business, and over time I managed to apply for a role internally that came up, and they gave me the job in one of their software development teams. So it kind of started there. And then from then on, it's probably been a little bit more normal. I spent a lot of time, a number of years doing software development with a kind of a broad range of technologies. I've worked with kind of Delphi and client server programming in the early days, worked with Java, a little bit of front end, but not a lot, some database work, not a lot. So a fairly broad kind of spectrum. I spent a number of years working in consultancy, doing the same kind of thing for our consulting clients. And then came sort of back out of consultancy, went into various businesses and worked as an architect for a few years, and then moved more into kind of leadership and management roles, which is where I sort of still find myself today. But I've always retained that interest and that passion and that desire to be hands-on and technical. The thing that still gets me out of bed in the morning, even though I don't do any real hands-on work anymore, the bit that really drives me is talking to technical teams and solving kind of architectural and technical problems. But the ability to do that on a bigger scale now with building teams to help solve those bigger problems is what I'm working on today.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's really interesting, especially about what you talked about that, from an educational point of view, for other reasons, not doing as well in your A levels and then not taking that offer you were given. So you didn't go through that traditional university route, yet have still been able to create a very impressive career within technology and STEM.
Yeah, and I
What
think
what
I
lessons
think, I think there's something there, Charlie, that's That's always stayed with me, and I've always been really conscious when I've been in that position then to hire other people to really think about does this role actually require a degree? Does it require somebody to have got the right degree at the right university? Some roles do, absolutely. You can't, in technology, there are a number of areas you're just going to struggle, or it's going to be impossible to do them without the right formal education, without the right kind of academic background. But there are many that don't. It might be advantageous to have it, but it's an alternate route to getting in. And because that's the route that I went, I've always been very careful to make sure that when I'm hiring, am I actually saying that this is required when it's not? And I've tried to do that throughout my career. We have a couple of people in our team today who've done a similar thing, that have actually changed careers, and they've got into tech and they're working in my team, but they started out doing something different. Went through university, did something completely different, totally different careers. Decided they didn't like it, taught themselves enough kind of technology to get in the door, and they're both very, very successful people in my team.
That's a brilliant sort of case studies, I guess, isn't it? Because it's when I speak to a lot of young people, it is always one of their first sort of reservations. Like if they don't know either A, formal education, or B, is it too late to join if they've studied something else? And quite clearly what you're saying is no, you can, as long as you're willing to learn, I guess, and if you're willing to embrace and be, I think a bit people also forget about within technology teams, from what I've seen, the importance of teamwork. Like if you can actually work as part of a team and you're solution minded, you, you can be taught the skills. Would you say that's would you say
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. I think that's one of the key things. If you have the passion for it, and you have you have enough talent and enough drive to go and teach yourself skills, many of the skills are transferable. As I said, you're not going to walk straight into a job in machine learning and artificial intelligence, because those kind of things, and hardware engineering, and kind of low level, you just need more of that kind of formal education and that background. But there are many, many roles today that you can get into. Skills are transferable across a number of different technologies, so you can get in the door using one set of technologies. Find that it's not quite right, or that the company switches and uses something else. Technology is just a tool for solving problems. It's just a way of achieving an outcome. And I think the best way to approach it is on that basis, that I can learn something here today, and yeah, that thing might be obsolete in 5 years. That's just how technology tends to work. It's one of the great things about it. You have to stay current. You have to stay up to date. But you can transfer those skills, and you can move from one technology to another if you're applying them in the same way.
Yeah, great. And so moving on, and we had quite an interesting conversation just before starting the podcast, and about your what was the right word here? The sort of your strong views on the abuse of privacy, especially by big tech, and so you've gone to quite some lengths to sort of be able to overcome that. And it'd be great just to hear from yourself. A, what's your view on the abuse of privacy in today's world? And I'd love to hear a few stories of what you've done to sort of solve it.
Yeah, sure. I do have some views. I think the level of kind of data collection that is going on today, not just in the big companies that people sort of know about. I think awareness is at a level now where people realise that this is going on. Companies like Meta and Google and Amazon, um, Apple to an extent, that they are collecting vast amounts of data on us from the devices in your pocket or on your desktop, and they are using it as a tradable commodity, and they're building highly profitable businesses on it. And I'm not really sure that many people understand that that is not just going on with those companies, going on with many, many others as well. And the kind of the data that is being collected is vast, it's egregious, it is being done in a way that is, I think, underhand in general, not always. Some companies are obviously a lot better than others. They're more transparent. But I do think it's a problem. I think it's a problem for the industry. I think it's a problem for for users of technology in general, in that they don't really have any way of avoiding it, unless you're lucky enough to understand the problem to a depth where you can protect yourself from it, and that is only a small percentage of the general population that are being traded in this way. So yeah, I have these problems, but I also have these problems with the way big tech kind of works. But I also love technology, and in particular, outside of work, I really like home automation technology, and of course that's where some of this stuff clashes, because most of the home automation tech today is from Amazon with Echo devices, or it's from Google with Nest or Hive, or Apple with Siri, or Cortana from Microsoft. And most home automation and most kind of home tech is based around the technology, but they're all recording what you do and what you say, and they're sending it to, obviously, to the cloud providers for analysis, and then they're integrating with other plugins and technology in the cloud. And I don't want kind of any of this for me. So I've sort of built, using open source and freely available kind of tools, I've built both a multi-room audio system and a full home automation kind of technology set for lights and fans, heating system, alarms, CCTV cameras at my home, which is all just fully contained. So there is no connectivity with any kind of tech provider. It's all just self-contained. I have complete control over all the data, and it's hard, and it's not for everybody, and it's something that you've got to have a kind of a passion and be willing to sort of spend the time and have the knowledge to be able to do. And I think that's the sad thing about it, is it's not kind of available for the general masses. It's not something that somebody can just go and buy off the shelf and choose to have a completely private system that they install in the home. And I would really like to see it get to the point where it is more generally available, and it is something that is, less of a technical person's hobby, and a thing that you have to tinker with and know how to program and know how to set hardware devices up, and something that is more commoditized, and something that is more off the shelf for more people to have that available. But yeah, passionate about both, and kind of managed to combine them in that way.
Yeah, and I totally support your views, and I do think more people are now aware of it. But I remember the day when I first found out that, or suspected in those days, that other devices were being tracked. Was that age-old example people talk about, that you talk about something totally random, and before you know it, it turns up on your social media feeds. If ever you want evidence that what we say is being constantly tracked and then stored somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it happened to me the other day. I take a lot of precaution. I kind of use VPNs on my phone, local VPNs, to stop that kind of tracking activity, but my wife doesn't. And we were doing exactly that 2 days ago. We were in a shop. We were talking about something that we were thinking of buying, and the following day, everywhere on her Facebook, which I don't use, but everywhere on her Facebook feed, adverts for this thing that we've been talking about buying in a shop the day before. Personally, I find it insidious. I think it's a big problem.
Yeah, and the companies, I think, is it Cambridge Analytics or what have you, as one of the founding ones, were caught abusing the data, and as you're right, Meta, Facebook at the time. Sometimes they live a world of, it's better to ask for forgiveness and permission, isn't it? And they will take the fines because they've made 10 times that in profit, probably. Right. So no, I have to say I do agree with your view, and but you're also right. If you're not technology minded, or you know what it's about, it's almost impossible to protect against it. Because when you talk about things turning mainstream, then am I right in saying that by creating an enclosed area, you're not, it's internet linked, but it's not linked to any of the sort of the off-the-shelf devices that Google or Amazon or others sell?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, everything is just the way I've done it. Everything is self-contained. I think there are ways that you can do it and still take advantage of cloud technology if you know which providers to use, and you're sort of making a conscious choice to use providers that are more transparent or are more circumspect with the data that they collect, or are completely private, you tend to have to pay for them because they've got to make money somehow. They're trying to run a business. And the reason that you don't pay for Facebook and Google and a lot of the tooling that you get from Amazon and other big tech is because they're making the profit off of what they collect from you. That's why the products that you use are free, or free for you to use as an end user, because you're not the customer, you're the product. You're the thing that they're selling. So you can use those tools for free. If you're working with a business that doesn't have that model, then typically you've got to pay for it. And there are a few. They're just not as mainstream, and they're harder to find, but they are out there. I've just chosen to do the whole thing internally. So I've bought equipment, and I run the storage and I run the servers. I actually build a lot of things on Raspberry Pi devices because they're sort of fun to use, and they're pretty small, and for single purpose jobs they're reasonably adequate and actually fairly highly powered these days. Some of the more recent ones. So that's the route that I chose.
Yeah. Well, if ever you sort of back up from the beginning of the podcast where you talked about your personal interest in tech, and although now as a leader in tech, you can't as a day job necessarily get involved in the core coding. It's so obvious that it's a key passion. That's probably, well, it's a clear reason why you've been able to move into leadership and thrive in the industry. So moving on to the last, and time always flies by when we've got topics that are pretty unique, and the abuse of privacy is such an interesting one that people don't talk about enough, I think. But now moving on to the career advice. So for many of our young people, who are hoping to be inspired by listening to these type of stories and wanting to work for leaders such as yourself, what are the one or two bits of advice you could give them that would help them stand out, get that foot in the door, or at least to an interview stage with you or someone in your team?
Yeah, I think probably a couple of things. The first one, because it applies to me, and I see that it applies to many other people that I've been lucky enough to work with, both now and in the past, is do something that you love, because you're never going to be as successful, and you'll certainly never be as happy doing something because it was what you thought you should do, or because that's where you ended up, coming out of education, because that's what you were interested in at the time and you're not interested in it now. If you're not doing something that you're passionate about and something that you love, it's always going to be hard. It's always going to be a slog. Do something that you love, get paid for effectively doing your hobby. You might not get paid as much, but you're going to be a lot happier. And by whatever criteria you define success, whether that's kind of career advancement, or whether it's earning a lot of money, or whether it's just being really happy, whether it's having the flexibility to do other things in your life, doing what you're passionate about and what you love is going to get you that success much more quickly than following some other kind of traditional route. Everybody, I think, on the same point, you should bear in mind that you work to live. It's not the other way around. Success doesn't come from spending 14 hours a day doing anything, particularly if it's not something you love. But you can get burnt out doing that too. If it's something that you are passionate about and you're lucky enough to have that job, you've found the perfect role in tech, you still need a life. You need to get away from the company, from colleagues, and you need to kind of balance that thing, because you'll get burnt out. You just won't realize that you're doing it as quickly. So have that balance. Do something that you're really passionate about. Have that balance, and always remember that you're kind of that you're working to live, and not the other way around. Is probably what I would say. In terms of getting through the door and kind of, I think demonstrating that you're keen and you're passionate. When I'm hiring, the things that stand out to me from candidates are, have they kind of understood what we're looking for, and do they have some skill in that area? That's the first thing, because you're just not, if your skills aren't relevant, you're not going to get there. And that doesn't necessarily mean like a lot of depth of experience in those skills. It just means that you've got something relevant, you've got something to bring to the party, and then demonstrate that you're why it is you want to do it. Why are you passionate about it? Why have you spent this time working on this on your own? What do you love about it? Can you show that you can work with other people? That's a key thing. There are so few roles now where you can genuinely just be an individual contributor and not have to work with other people and not have to collaborate. If you can't find a way of working with people and you can't find a way of collaborating with other people, and you can't find a way of having those sort of technical disagreements, because another thing about the great thing about tech is there's never one way of solving a problem or achieving an outcome. And everybody has a different opinion typically on what the best way of doing it is. And so we get involved in lots of discussions and yes, sometimes kind of arguments, but you find a way of collaborating, you find a way of sort of committing as a team to doing something that moves us forward as a whole. I would probably say those are the key things. If you can demonstrate that, if you can show somebody on an initial interview, you care about it, you love it. Why do you love it? Can you work with other people? And have you got obviously the relevant skills? And then whatever route you came into that, I think you've got a good chance.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think all of those points are super valid, and the work to live. I couldn't agree with you more there. That yes, people should be passionate, and yes, especially if you're career minded, you want to put in as much as you want to get out. But work to live. You've got to have that balance, because burnout can happen at any stage. And I think that's really insightful to hear that from leaders, people who, you run tech teams yourself. So to hear it from the top down, that's the mantra, is really inspiring. And I agree with you on the team building as well. That willingness to be able to learn how to have a difficult conversation and create a successful outcome is a learning, and young people especially won't have the life experience, so they've got to be open to the learning of it. But no, Darren, thank you. I think those points were really, really astute on for many of our young listeners listening. So, well, look, time has flown by as always, and so it's time for me to say, a big, big thank you to Darren. Darren, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, that's another episode of the Future Tech podcast. It's shared on our webpage, arrowsgroup.com/podcast, as well as with the STEM Ambassador Association. So thanks you to everyone who is listening on the recording. And this is another episode of Future Tech.